It doesn't even fit on screen. Look at this. This just arrived 2 weeks early, and I technically can't actually open it for another 5 days. That is my exercise done for the week. You really want to know what this is? I'm dying to open it up, but I've got to wait another 5 days. How do you think I'm feeling? I've got to wait 5 days to open up this package, and I'm just dying to open it up right now. So yes, today is Tech Thursday, and I decided why not do a follow-up video on what I uploaded yesterday and talk about exporting in a variety of formats, exporting in 1080, exporting in 4K, and primarily for YouTube. So what would I recommend? How do you do the process? Let's find out. Let's get this thing. So as you can see, I have a timeline open here, and these are some of the clips that I used in yesterday's video for the B-roll. There's one that's 1080, there's one that's 4K, and we're just gonna put them both in the same sequence and we're gonna export them together, and I'm gonna show you exactly what I would do in this type of scenario to get the best quality result to upload it to YouTube at the very end. So the first thing you want to do is go into Edit, go down to Preferences, and then you want to go into Media. So in Media, the one thing that you need to look at definitely is default media scaling. So this is down as none. What you need to change that to is always have that as set to frame size. So what that is basically going to do is if I upload different quality, different resolutions of video into the same timeline, some of them may come down in size, they may have a different aspect ratio, they won't always have the same aspect ratio. So when you have set to frame size chosen, everything should come in all together, and Premiere Pro does it automatically for you. So even if I just give an example, if I keep that as none, click OK, this is our 1080 footage here. So this is our 4K. So if I drag my 4K down into the timeline sequence, which most people would do, I will show you a different way to do that in a second. So this is our 4K footage here. Let's create a little bit of a tidier space for us to look at, and this is our 4K footage, and if I drop my 1080 footage in there as well, let's unlink that so we don't get any audio. There we go. So our 4K footage, and then as you can see, this is our 1080. So this is what happens when you just drop two different resolution quality videos into the same timeline. Now there is a sort of an easy way around this, but it is a lot more effort. Right now we do have two different clips in our timeline, and it's fairly easy to fix that. But if you're the type of guy who ends up having 50, 100 different clips in one timeline, and that's normally me every day, it does get to be a massive pain in the ass. So I'm going to show you what you can do to fix this solution first of all. So what you can do is right click on the clip and go to set to frame size. So now the two of our clips are going to be the exact same. Let's squash those together, and that's an easy way of fixing it. But that's easy because there's only two files there, there's only one I needed to fix. So let's undo all of this. Let's delete these off our timeline. Let's delete our sequence. And if we go back up to Edit, Preferences, and back into Media, what you need to change is change the default media scaling to set to frame size. So what this basically does is Premiere Pro does everything that I just showed you a second ago automatically. So if I have 50, 100, even just 10 clips into a timeline, Premiere Pro does all that automatically for me, so I don't actually have to go through every single clip, right click, set to frame size, right click, set to frame size. This is a much easier way for you to handle your workload. So set to frame size, click OK. And what we need to do now is we need to actually create a sequence. So something that people don't really understand is the first clip that you drop into the timeline automatically chooses what type of resolution that sequence is going to be in. So if I have, let's say, my 1080 clip, and if I drop that in first of all into the timeline, that sequence then, that source is going to be 1080p. And if I want to export that later on in 4K, the source and the output won't match up. So that's why you got to make sure, if I want to export this video in 4K, I need the source to be 4K. Now, I could easily just drag and drop my 4K clip into the timeline first of all, and then drag my 1080p into it after that, and export it all in 4K, and that will be nice and handy. But an easier way and a better way for you to handle your workload is if you go up to File, New, and go into Sequence, and let's say you want to export something in 4K. That means we need to create a sequence that is in 4K, which is 3840 by 2160, I believe. So if we go down to Red, now a lot of people do get confused with this as well. Just because this is named for a red camera does not mean you need to film in a red camera in order to use this sequence. Just because it has a different name on it, a different camera, that doesn't matter. Forget about that. What matters is that all of these different parameters actually match up. All of these different sequence settings are correct with what we want to export with at the very end. So if I go into the red camera settings, go into HD 4K, and come down here, the one I'm looking for is 4K HD 16:9 25. And these are all the settings that I need to check on the right hand side. I need to make sure that all of these match up with the camera settings that I had on when I'm recording. So what we're looking at is 3840 by 2160, that is 4K. And 16:9, 25 frames per second. Yes, I recorded everything in the camera at 25 frames per second. 48 kilohertz audio at 16-bit. So if I want to export my final video here in 4K, that's the type of sequence that I need to choose. So let's say you wanted to export everything in 1080p instead. Well, what you need to do then is go up to Digital SLR, go into 1080p, and the one that I'm looking for is DSLR 1080p 25, because I want to export it in 1080p, and I've recorded everything in the camera at 25 frames per second. But that's not what I'm going to do here. What I want to do is actually export both the 1080p clip and the 4K in 4K. And there's a reason for that. I'd slightly explained it in yesterday's video. It's all to do with the compression. I'm going to massively simplify all this. If you upload an export in 4K up to YouTube, it's going to handle the 1080p clip a lot handier. It's going to make it look a little bit more sharp. So what I want to do is go down to Red and choose my 4K HD 16:9 25, and check that everything there is okay. Yes, editing mode red camera, don't worry about that. That's just the name on it. And once that's done, we can click on OK. So that means that our sequence now is in 4K. It's in 3840 by 2160 I should say. So when I drag and drop my 4K clip into the timeline, unlink our audio here, and drag my 1080 clip into the timeline here, these should both look the exact same. So as you can see, our 1080p clip and our 4K clip both have the same aspect ratio. None of them is smaller or bigger or more zoomed in. It's not scaled up or scaled down in comparison to the other one. And that is because we have chosen set to frame size. Remember when we went into edit, preferences and media? That was important. So it makes it a lot easier starting off like that. Now if you do make a mistake and you do need to go back and change your sequence settings, there's a very easy way to do that. Go up to sequence settings, and here's all of the sequence settings that you can change here. You have your 25 frames per second, your frame size, your square pixels. Now before we get into the exporting section, what I do want to talk about is just why I export in 4K and why I have recently started only exporting in 4K, even if I haven't recorded anything in my timeline in 4K. Some people don't think it's a good idea. Some people do think it is actually a better idea. I personally think from my experience it is a little bit of a better idea. And the reason is because when I export this in 4K and I upload it onto YouTube, the compression and everything is going to be a lot lighter in the settings that I choose for the 4K, as opposed to exporting it in 1080p and uploading it in 1080. The compression is going to be a little bit more harsh on the 1080p clip that you've exported and uploaded, because it is a lower quality that you are uploading in general. Same amount of compression, but if you upload it in a higher resolution, then the compression is going to be a little bit easier on you because your export is at a higher resolution overall. So let's jump into the export settings. Bam! Go into File, Export, and we're going to choose Media. So your little exporting window will pop up now in a second. Bam, 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 bam. I'm waiting for the exporting window to open. Okay, so now that our exporting window is open, there's two things that you need to look at first of all. And what I normally do is I look at the source and I look at the output. So the source are the settings that you basically filmed in. So you need the source settings to match up with your output settings. And your output settings is what you're going to export in. Those are the settings that you have chosen. So make sure that your source is the correct one, 3840 by 2160. Yes, that's 4K. Filmed in 25 frames per second. Yes. And we have no audio on these clips because they are B-roll. So the output then, this is what I'm exporting in. It's 3840 by 2160, that matches up, yes. 25 frames per second, that matches up as well, yes. And there's some of these settings down here which we will change in a second anyway. Your output name, this is where you click and you choose the name of the video, where you want it to save to. Make sure you save it to a place that you know. I've seen students from this year and I've seen students from last year when they export stuff and they have no idea where they go. Absolutely no idea where they go. And that's a waste of time in their class, especially if it's a rush at the very end. Most students do end up rushing assignments at the very end. So make sure you know where that exported file goes and make sure it's a name that you can remember and you can spot very clearly. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to change my preset. I have a chosen preset up here, CBR 100 Mbps 3840 by 2160 at 25 frames per second. So once we're done all of these rigging around with the settings and perfecting everything that we need, what you can do then is save the preset and you don't have to go back every time and redo all of those settings. They're right there for you. All of this can save a ton of time. Some of this stuff can take you hours and hours to edit and edit and edit. And the last thing you want to do at the very end is to all the time redo all of your export settings. It's one of those things that's not exciting, it's not fun, and it's just a pain in the ass. So make sure you do save a preset. If you do want to save a preset afterwards, you have your save preset button here, click in there. And I can't save the current preset because it already is a preset. But once you click in there, you can rename that preset to whatever you want and it will always be there. If you click it down on this, my preset is right here. So down underneath all of this, then we have a few different tabs that you can look at. We have effects, video, audio, multiplexer, captions, and publish. There's really only two of these tabs that you really need to look at, and that is your video and your audio. So if we go and look down our video section, we will go down to our profile. So your baseline is going to be normally for your old school phones, the first few video cameras on phones that came out. Your main is going to be for just a medium quality that the encoder can export in. And then you have your high. I haven't experimented with a high 10 yet. It is a relatively new one that has come out. So your high is going to export and render your entire video in as best quality as possible. So that's why I always choose high. So then we go down to our level. So I normally export it in 5.2 level because that is the highest that H.264 can handle, and that is the format that we are exporting it in. So let's just say I was to change the level to 3.2. And if we scroll back up here to our basic video settings, what has happened is our width and our height have changed from 3840 by 2160, which is 4K, to 720 by 576, which is 720p. And as we mentioned yesterday, nobody wants to export in 720p nowadays. That's real old school. So let's just say we keep our level at 3.2, which is what I wouldn't normally do. And if I go and change this back to 3840 by 2160, there you go, invalid frame size or frame rate for this level. Please lower the video bounds or frame rate or increase the profile and level and try again. So you can't actually export a H.264 in 4K with a level of 3.2. So that is why I go down and I do keep my level as 5.2, because that's the highest that the H.264 can export in, and that's the format that we are exporting with. Let's go back down and change our level to 5.2. Give that a second to do its magic. And seeing as that's 5.2, that has returned back to 3840 by 2160, which is the 4K quality that we are looking to export in. And then if we scroll back up here, you want to make sure to keep aspect as square pixels 1.0. Make sure your frame rate is the correct frame rate that you have filmed in. So then we'll go down to our bitrate encoding. So in the bitrate encoding, you will see three different options. You will see CBR, VBR 1 pass, and VBR 2 pass. So what I'll always choose here is CBR, which stands for constant bitrate, which means that it will stay at the same bitrate for every clip throughout the entire video and it won't change. That's the best way to do it. If you choose VBR 1 pass, then VBR stands for variable bitrate, which means that the bitrate will actually change per clip within the video. And that's not what you want. VBR 2 pass will also do the same, only it will render the entire video twice instead of the 1 pass, which does it once. The VBR 2 pass is a little bit better than the 1 pass, but if you want to get the best quality video overall, then choose CBR constant bitrate. So that is what I will always choose. So then we go down to our target bitrate, and that is set at 25. And then that's a problem because we have a high resolution 3840 by 2160, which is 4K, and then we have a low bitrate of 25. The problem with that is it's going to cause a lot of artifacts in your video, and that's one thing you definitely do not want. So what I normally do is I change my target bitrate to 100. And I know there's a lot of people out there that might be like, what are you doing? It's so high. Why? Wait, when you upload it onto YouTube, if you have a higher bitrate with the higher resolution, then the compression at the very end when you upload it to YouTube is going to yield a better result in general, as opposed to having a lower bitrate at, let's say, 40 or 50. I know that 100 may be a little bit higher than some people go, but it allows for more space for the compression to act on the video when you upload it, and the end result on YouTube then will just be a higher quality video and better looking in general. So that's why I choose 100 for the target bitrate. So underneath all this then, you don't need keyframe distance, don't need video in VR because we haven't recorded anything in VR. So then we go into our audio tab. So in our audio tab, look at the audio format. You have AAC and you have MPEG. What you should always choose is AAC because that stands for Advanced Audio Coding, and it's much better. It's the actual successor to MPEG. So it is the better version of an MPEG. So always choose AAC, Advanced Audio Coding. And then when we scroll down a little bit in this audio tab, you have audio codec AAC, sample rate 48,000 Hertz, which is what you need because your microphone on your camera will record in 48,000 Hertz. So channels stereo, yes. Audio quality high. Why would you want it anything other than high? So keep it high. And bitrate, you want it at 320, that's the highest we can go to. And you want to give precedence to the bitrate because that will just give you a much better and higher quality audio recording in general. So keep the precedence with the bitrate and not the sample rate. And at the very end then, make sure you use maximum render quality because that will also make the rendering and the exporting at a much intense and much better quality overall. So that is what I do for exporting in 4K. Now if you are exporting in 1080 and not 4K, the only things you really need to change are make sure your source settings at the very start, like we went through, is at the right sequence settings. And then if you go back here, you can change your video settings to 1920 by 1080, which is 1080 quality. You can, if you want, reduce your target bitrate a little bit more if you want, possibly to 80 or possibly to 60, but that is up to yourself. And that is about it. And at the very end then, what you need to make sure is make sure to use maximum render quality is ticked as well, because that will yield a better rendering overall, a more intense rendering and a better exported video. So once you're done all that, click export at the very end and you are finished. So that is the end of the video today. That is the end of Tech Thursday for this week. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe if you are not already. Come follow me on Instagram as well, and I will catch you guys next week for another Tech Thursday. And in a few days time, I will be opening up that box. You will see a video from it, but I've got to resist the temptation, man. If you knew I was in that box, oh God, you will see. You will see. I will see you guys next time. Bye bye. Bye.